is the author of Secret Seductions, Mind-Blowing Orgasms Every Day, What Men Really Want in Bed, and What Women Really Want in Bed. I need to warn you in the front area, she may squirt in your direction. Ladies and gentlemen, Cynthia Gentry.
I don't know quite how to respond to that introduction, but thank you. Thank you, Litquake. Thank you, Amanda, for having me here. I feel like I'm on a boat or something.
Yeah, you are.
Anyway, this piece was published in a... yeah, really.
Be closer to the microphone.
Close?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Like,
Okay.
make the-
This piece was published in an anthology called Her Story. It's called Following Anais, or How I Became a Sex Writer. I'm sitting in a cafe in Menlo Park staring at the cursor on my computer screen. On my right, some guy drones on and on about second-round funding and customer touchpoints. Nearby, an au pair entertains her friends with a loud monologue in rapid-fire German. On my left, a woman with a perfect blonde ponytail and an Hermes scarf yammers about a charity fundraiser. Little do they know that next to them, I'm writing an orgy scene so hot it would make them choke on their cappuccinos. I imagine turning to the society matron and asking her if she knows any good metaphors for the clitoris. I quickly discard the idea. It's not that I'm afraid of shocking her. It's just that I try to avoid corny romance novels metaphors for genitalia. That's just the kind of sex writer I am. Yes, instead of writing the great American novel, I'm trying to figure out how to describe two men having sex with two women at a tantric puja while their hosts go at it on a raised dais for everyone to see. Talk about your customer touch points. I didn't set out to become a sex writer, although anyone who knew about the Barbie doll nudist camps I staged as a child might disagree. Through most of my teen and college years, I remained relatively innocent, without even a serious boyfriend until I was 22, a boyfriend I then proceeded to marry. So how did I become a woman who, at 41, found herself advising the readers of a men's magazine that a plastic-wrapped electric toothbrush can in a pinch double as a vibrator? Flashback to 1991. I was 28, married for almost 4 years. My marriage, though amiable, was foundering. My libido had decided to take a vacation. I considered putting missing ads for it on milk cartons. This was troubling, to make an understatement, because I liked sex. A lot. After losing my virginity disastrously my freshman year and having a few more episodes of deeply unsatisfying carnal relations, I had met my husband and discovered what all the fuss was about. But as the years passed, my libido ebbed away like air leaking out of a tire, and I found myself limping along in a marriage that had started out like a sexy convertible sports car and now more closely resembled a Yugo on its last legs. When we'd been dating, I'd been so wild for my husband that we could only make it as far as the backseat of the car. Now his kisses left me cold. I tried to blame antidepressants, but deep down I knew they weren't the sole cause. Unfortunately, it wasn't just my sexual desire that had dried up. My desire to write, a constant over the previous decades, disappeared too. Around this time, my husband and I went with another couple to see the movie Henry and June about Henry Miller and Anais Nin. I sat in the darkened theater entranced, longing to transport myself back to Paris in the 1920s. I began reading everything of Nin's I could find. I discovered that she had written erotica during a time when she needed money. I read Delta, Venus, and Little Birds, and with those first 2 slim volumes, I lost my literary cherry. My libido began to stir. Then I discovered erotica anthologies like The Best American Erotica. I began to have erotic fantasies, lots of them. My libido started to reappear, although sadly, my attraction for my husband didn't. Let's just say I spent many nights with my eyes closed, imagining George Clooney. However, what hadn't reappeared was my desire to write. Writing was a chore. I was in a screenwriting workshop, but with each session I brought in less and less material. I started a novel, wrote about 50 pages, and then lost interest. I wrote stories about relationships, but none of them featured so much as a kiss. Then one night I got sick of myself. My husband was in his study playing guitar. I had done the dishes, I had paid the bills, I didn't feel like watching TV. Since this was before the internet, I couldn't even surf the web. What the hell, I thought. I'll write up one of my fantasies. I had no deadline, nobody waiting to see what I was going to write, nobody who was going to see what I was going to write. I decided to write something simply to entertain myself, or to be perfectly honest, to arouse myself. I didn't care if it was good or bad. I sat down to write the fantasy just as I had imagined it. The words began to flow from me again, like those days in my childhood when writing was play. Several hours and 3,000 words later, I discovered that my so-called writer's block was gone. In a preface to Little Birds, Anais Nin wrote, "Very few writers have of their own accord sat down to write erotic tales or confessions. In a way, I had proven her both right and wrong. On one level, I did write my first erotic tale of my own accord. At the same time, I had no choice. Nin wrote her erotica because she needed money. I wrote mine because I needed, desperately, an outlet for my creativity and my libido. I began to write more stories just for me. Most of them stayed on my computer, but I showed a few to friends who then passed them on, as it turned out. I soon discovered what I had done to my reputation. At a dinner party one night, when the host introduced me to one of his friends, a big smile crept over his face. "Oh, you're the pornographer," he said. "Ha," was my weak reply. "I guess I am. Ha ha." Yes, my refound creativity had consequences. As I started writing again and feeling again, I became less satisfied with being unsatisfied. I got tired of complaining about my corporate job, so I quit to start my own business. And a few months later, after years of couples therapy, I realized that my marriage was over. I had changed, but my dear husband hadn't. I couldn't stay just because I didn't want to hurt him, and so I moved out. Then I began a new chapter, literally. I started a graduate program in creative writing. Drawing from my own experiences as a newly single woman, I wrote a lot about comically bad sex, or, after a particularly scarring breakup, tragically good sex. I still didn't consider myself a sex author, much less a pornographer, because I was trying to amuse and move people, not arouse them. I was a real author. Until a publisher friend approached me to write the erotica for a book on tantric sex. Now, I knew nothing about tantric sex, but did it matter? No. A real byline dangled in front of me, and all I could think was that I'd be a published writer. So I wrote that book in about 5 months, and when my friend asked me to write a book of 365 sex tips, I said yes to that as well. And that's how I found myself in that cafe. I'm sure I looked like any other writer. I didn't sit there heaving and blushing and sighing as my fingers pecked away. In fact, like most writers I know, I spent a lot of time staring into space. But instead of puzzling over how to describe a particularly interesting landscape, I was puzzling over how to describe a particularly athletic sexual position. Hunched over my laptop and latte, I occasionally thought of something else Anais Nin once said. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. When I took the chance of writing out that fantasy so many nights ago, I proved her right. I became more willing to take risks. Risks that led others to tell me, "I wish I were as brave as you." But I never considered myself brave. I just did what I had to do, and my life blossomed. Thank you.